When I lived in Joburg last year, I'd always randomly see electric cars, whether it was on campus, on the streets, or at Mall of Africa, and they'd always just kind of baffle me. I'd always ask myself how it's possible for people to not only own electric cars considering the country we live in, but also feasibly use them on a day-to-day basis with what seemed like no issues whatsoever. So then, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about the electric car market in South Africa, figure out what they cost, how easy or hard they are to own, and if they are even slightly comparable to the internal combustion engine cars that we're used to. To find electric cars available for purchase in South Africa right now, we're going to go on to Auto Trader. We're going to filter by the fuel type. We want electric, and then we're going to go to minimum year is 2024, and we're going to search 248 cars. We're going to sort by price, low to high, and let's see what we come up with. So then the cheapest electric car that you can buy is the 2025 BYD Dolphin, going for 520,000 rands. If we scroll down, we can also find the 2025 GWM Order 3 going for 540,000 rands. So yeah, this price range does seem to be very Chinese dominated. We're going to continue scrolling down here, see what we can find. So then scrolling down in this kind of low range price segment, we also find the 2025 BYD Atto 3 for 750,000 rands, a little SUV looking thing. So that is what you can expect to find for that 500 to around about 750,000 rand range in terms of electric cars in South Africa. That is the cheapest price point that you can find an electric car in South Africa. The minimum is 500,000 rands, and it seems like a majority of these cars are just a lot of offerings from Chinese manufacturers. I'm going to try and scroll down some more, see if we can find some more variety, but does seem like a majority are just a lot of Chinese manufacturers. In the low range, there are also 2024 mini hatches. These little awkward little 3-door small minis. Imagine buying this car for 515,000 rands. That is just, it's absolute insanity, but that is the reality of the electric car segment in South Africa, is that it is a bit pricey. Let's see what that mid-range has to offer. So for the mid-range segment, we're going to look for cars that are around the million rand mark. And I know that doesn't really sound that mid-range, but like I said, that's just the reality of electric cars in South Africa. They are very, very expensive, and for a cool 750,000 rands, you can get yourself a 2025 Mini SE, a 2-door little hatchback thing for 750,000 rands. You can also get like slightly used Volvo XC40s for around this price range, which, as you can see with this one right here, 750,000 rands for a 2024 Volvo XC40 P6 recharge single motor plus. What I'm out for. And moving up in price a bit, you can also find cars like these, a 2024 Mercedes-Benz EQA 250 AMG line, slightly used, but for 870,000 rands. You can have a little, I don't know what this is, man. Is this an SUV, a hatchback? You can have a car that is confused as to its identity for 870,000 rands. You can also find stuff like a slightly used 2024 BMW iX1 with 34,000 kilometers on the clock for 880,000 rands. Another BMW 2024 iX3 for the same price, 880,000 rands there. And at the very, very top of this price range, we find sportier stuff like a 2025 BYD Seal for 990,000 rands, a nearly brand new 2024 Mercedes-Benz EQB 350 4MATIC AMG line, a 2025 Mini Cooper Countryman SE All 4 for, well, $1 million, and higher end stuff like this BMW iX 2024 model, slightly used, for slightly above that million rand range. And the high end electric car segment is actually where it starts getting a little bit interesting, you know, as interesting as a Hoover with wheels and a steering wheel on it can get. This is where we start getting sportier cars like the MG Cyberster, BMW i5, and the Mercedes EQE sedan and SUV. Once you start getting very deep into the millions, we can find very interesting cars like the BMW i7, Jaguar I-Pace, and Audi RS e-tron GT. And at the very top of all of them, we have the the daddy of all electric cars, I'm assuming in the world right now, the Rolls-Royce Spectre, adds a mouth-watering 18 million rand. Smagate. Jeez, that is Ket Maklala money. That is absolute insanity. But political jokes aside, let's move on. So then, yeah, that's what you can expect in terms of electric cars in South Africa right now. It's just really expensive cars that you could get for like a fraction of the price if you just bought the internal combustion engine variant of them. In fact, I'm going to prove that you could buy these cars at a fraction of the price by simply just looking around. I mean, if you just sought for SUVs for around the 200 to 400,000 rand range, you can get yourself a great little mini SUV, stuff like the Cherry Tiggo Pro 4, Hyundai Venues and Haval Joliens that are relatively comparable to the GWM Aura Beetle looking thing. And to make stuff easy for us, to make it easy for us to compare electric vehicles to internal combustion engine vehicles in the country, we're going to use a point system. So here, in terms of the low end of electric cars compared to the low end of the combustion engine segment, electric vehicles simply just don't stand a chance. A point will go to ICE cars here. And if you start comparing like the mid-range segment of electric cars versus internal combustion cars, it's really kind of crazy, the difference between the two segments. I mean, for that money, you could literally buy an entire buggy like this 2.8 GT6 or an entire huge SUV like this Ford Everest. You could even get yourself into much sportier stuff like this Golf 8 GTI and Audi A4. Let's not forget that this is the same price point where you could only get like small little mini hatchbacks in the electric vehicle segments. That is absolute insanity. So yeah, in terms of the mid-range, another point definitely goes to ICE cars. And I'm not even going to get into cars that are worth north of $1 million, because the difference in just value and variety between ICE and EVs in this country in that price segment is simply astonishing. Like, a point goes to ICE vehicles here just because it's not a competition at all. You can go onto Auto Trader and test this out yourself. The difference is absolutely incredible. So then it doesn't really look like EVs are much of a value proposition when we compare their pricing to the world of ICE vehicles, but there is still the possibility that they make up for their extortionate pricing by being way cheaper to run than ICE vehicles in the country. So let's investigate that by finding out what it would cost to own and run an EV in South Africa nowadays. So let's say you have a brand new base model BMW 420i Grand Coupe and your friend has the same car but in EV form, the BMW i4 eDrive 35. Let's say that you both live here in the north of the Waterfall Country Estates in Midrand and work at Discovery Bank, approximately 17.8 kilometers away from where you live. Your 420i consumes 6.2 liters of petrol every 100 kilometers, while your friend's electric i4 consumes approximately 15.1 to 18.6 kilowatt hours of electricity per 100 kilometers. If you both commute around 40 kilometers every day to work and back and maybe some grocery runs here and there, your petrol 420i would consume 2.6 liters of petrol every day, costing you 53 rands 87 cents according to the current price of 95 unleaded petrol, according to the Fuels Industry Association of South Africa, which is about 20 rand and 72 cents per liter. Your friend, on the other hand, would consume around 6.04 to 7.44 kilowatt hours of electricity every day on that daily commute, costing them anywhere from around 12 rands and 8 cents on the very, very low to about 33 rands and 48 cents on the very, very high end, if we assume that electricity costs around 2 rands to 4 rand 50 per kilowatt hour. And although the figures for the price of electricity per kilowatt hour are just very rough approximations from this EcoFlow blog post, it does give us a good understanding of what it could potentially cost to run an electric car on a daily basis. So then, in terms of fuel consumption or electricity consumption or source of energy consumption, EVs definitely get a point here. I mean, yes, your friends paid considerably more than you when they initially bought the car, but they are paying less on a daily basis for going the same distance as you. So yeah, definitely a point for EVs here. If you and your friend owned your BMWs for, let's say, like 10 years, you would eventually run out of the warranty and service plan from the dealer and would have to start maintaining your cars on your own. And to put it simply, EVs are just way cheaper to maintain than ICE vehicles, simply because of how they work and because they just have way less moving components. See, EVs work by having batteries that supply power to electric motors that spin the wheels and make the car move, and ICE vehicles work by, well, I think if you're a subscriber of this channel, you will be very familiar with how ICE vehicles work, with how many times my ex-BMW has been apart. So let's not describe that. The point is that EVs are way more mechanically simple, meaning that they are way cheaper and more simple to maintain. EV service intervals are also way longer than ICE vehicle service intervals, with the former being able to go 30,000 kilometers between services and the latter having to only go 15,000 kilometers before it's time for an oil change. Each service also costs considerably less for EV vehicles than ICE vehicles, because you only have to service wear components like the brakes, suspension components, pollen filters, and like stuff like greasing the door hinges. There really isn't that much to do, which is obviously something I cannot say about ICE vehicles, especially as they age past like that 10-15 year mark. We all know what it takes to keep such cars on the road. The one thing that you do have to worry about when it comes to EVs is the battery, because it does kind of deplete in capacity over the years as you drive it more. But considering the fact that most EVs have like 8-year battery warranties, I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem for you. And I can't really say that there isn't like significant risk factors when it comes to ICE cars, because the entire drivetrain is a risk factor itself, especially when the car starts getting a lot older. You're going to find yourself frequenting mechanic shops quite often. Ask me how I know. So yeah, EVs definitely way better in terms of maintenance. And as such, a big old fat point goes to EVs in terms of maintenance cost. I mean, unless you buy an EV hoping to own it for a very long time, and then the battery dies like 5 years after the warranty expires, and now you have to order it from the dealership and just kind of pay whatever they want you to pay, and then have to wait for it to be ordered from the factory and all that palaver. Unless that happens, EVs are still far superior to ICE vehicles when it comes to maintenance. In terms of what it would cost both of you to insure your cars, there are a few factors that we have to take into consideration before we can determine who is going to pay less in insurance. EVs are typically a lot more technologically advanced than their ICE counterparts, but that means that their parts are often like 25.5% higher in cost than ICE vehicles, according to Thatcham research. Parts are also more scarce, and repairs take up to 14% longer because of the fundamental lack of EV technicians. Not only in the country, kind of worldwide, there's a bit of a problem. Because of those factors, EVs are simply a lot more risky to insure if you're looking at it from the perspective of an insurance company. A car that takes longer to repair, has scarcer spare parts, and has more expensive spare parts as well is a lot riskier than a car that is kind of not that, and is something that we're all used to, and there's a plethora of technicians that work on them and parts are everywhere. They are a lot riskier to insure than ICE cars, and as such, ICE cars are way less expensive to insure than EVs as of right now. Could change in the future, but that is the reality of the situation right now. So a point definitely goes to ICE cars here. For short distance daily commutes, EVs take it, and it's not really a question. It could literally take you like zero effort to keep your car charged. You either plug it in when you come back from work, or you plug it in at work if your work has a charging station. Literally a no-brainer. EVs take it here. They're unlike ICE cars where you have to go to a physical petrol station to try and fill up with petrol, which is something that you might do like once or twice every 2 weeks, but it is still an extra step that you don't need to take with EVs unless you have like a petrol station at your house, which I doubt. So a point goes to EVs here in terms of short distance commute convenience. It is the complete opposite story when we take a look at long distance travel. See, unlike ICE cars where if you're low on fuel, you simply pull into a petrol station, tell the petrol attendant what you want, wait 2 to 3 minutes for them to fill your car up, pay, and you're gone. That's definitely not the case with EVs, where you can actually end up spending like 20 minutes to an hour of your life just waiting for your car to fill up, depending on how low your battery is. That is 20 minutes to an hour of your life that you will never get back. So a point definitely goes to ICE vehicles in terms of long distance travel. So then in terms of convenience, it is a draw between ICE vehicles and EVs, with ICE vehicles being better for long distance travel and EVs better for those short daily commutes. So then let's see if there are any differences when we compare the charging infrastructure to the petrol station infrastructure in the country. As of 2025, there are approximately 500 fast and slow chargers that are publicly available and over 400 public chargers that are available through the PlugShare app, which is kind of like ways for EV charging point. This means that there are approximately 7 public chargers for every 1 EV, which is kind of impressive. I'm not gonna lie, and a lot higher than what I thought it was. Planning long road trips is also relatively easy nowadays if you have an EV, because you can use apps like PlugShare to find like the live status of every available charger in the entire country. But me personally, I'm still not convinced, Chief. I'm still not convinced. Like, I'd love to like take an EV on a cross-country road trip just to kind of fill out the infrastructure myself, see if I'd be actually like comfortable with owning an EV realistically in South Africa, and if that is something that is as easy as the research says it will. So if you're watching this and you work for BMW, an i4 would do very nicely for such purposes, reach out. My email is in the channel description. Please reach out. Anyway, let's move on. But as good as the EV charging infrastructure has got over the past few years, it is still incomparable to the petrol station infrastructure. I mean, there are over 1,750 petrol stations in Gauteng alone. That is 1 province out of 9. So yeah, a point definitely goes to ICE vehicles here, simply because they have like a 100-year head start when it comes to infrastructure. But that isn't to discredit EVs. I mean, it is really impressive, the charging infrastructure that already exists, and you probably wouldn't have a problem owning an EV if you lived in a heavily populated area with a high density of charging points. It costs approximately 9 to 24,000 rands to install a home charging system, which yes is a one-off expense, a one-off investment if you will, but you still are paying for the privilege of increasing your electricity bill at the end of the day. So a point definitely goes to ICE vehicles here, because we don't have to pay for petrol stations to be built yet. But something else to consider in terms of charging is the disease that has been plaguing South Africa for a very long time now: load shedding. Imagine coming home from work with an empty battery, plugging your EV in, waking up the next morning only to find that your car has been charged like a quarter of the way because of load shedding. And granted, it has been like 100 days since we've last had load shedding, but like your relationship with that one toxic ex that your gents keep warning you about, it will be back sooner than later. When it comes to home charging feasibility, a point will go to ICE vehicles. And this is not because EVs are like not feasible to own totally, but because our local reality makes owning one way more stressful than it should. And with that, we can wrap up the infrastructure segment of this video. In terms of convenience, charging versus petrol network, and home charging feasibilities, ICE vehicles still come out on top, and EVs are catching up, yes, but they still have a lot of ground to cover before they can go head to head or toe to toe with petrol station. So then in conclusion of this video, it has been really interesting to get into the world of EVs in South Africa. They are a lot more feasible than what I thought they would be, and are definitely getting up there in terms of being a competitor to ICE cars. Yes, they are very expensive to buy, but at the end of the day, you are making an investment into something that will not take a lot of money to, one, maintain in the future, and two, run in the future as well. We saw the cost difference in terms of running these cars on a daily basis in South Africa. It's really kind of no competition in terms of the pricing, at least with how petrol is priced in the country right now. And I do believe that as globally and locally the electric car segment grows and flourishes, the infrastructure will develop to a point where it is actually very feasible to buy an electric car, like wherever you are in the country. Right now, it is kind of a thing that only city slickers can do, people living in major CBDs, simply because of charging point density. Wouldn't make sense for me to buy an electric car when I live out here in the boondoes with the price of electricity right now, and with the lack of availability of charging points. I would need to live in a way more populated area. But as time goes on, the infrastructure will develop, and I believe that as the infrastructure develops, there will be a lot more competition in terms of the amount of cars and the variety of electric cars that you can get in South Africa. As we saw, there's not really that much variety in terms of the electric cars that you can buy right now. But as infrastructure develops, as the entire segment grows as a whole, I believe there will be an influx of different manufacturers coming in and giving us their offerings, which means that the price to buy an EV will eventually get to a point where it is cheaper than buying petrol cars. That's a brave statement to say, but I do truly believe it. And yes, those are my thoughts on electric vehicles in South Africa. That is everything you need to know about electric vehicles in South Africa. And I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it. But until the next one, goodbye.